I actually see what's happened in the last sort of few months, particularly with the Australian, but you have to say also that Fairfax and ABC were largely absent from the field, so in some ways the Murdoch press pretty much had the issue to themselves, for reasons I'll get to in a minute, is that to me this actually is a profound sign of weakness, not of strength. It's exactly the opposite of how they tell the narrative. What I mean by that is that those who know about this issue, who follow it, who write about it, who spend time in Palestine, who know anything about the situation in the US, Europe, England, etc., other parts of the world, know and realise, as I'll explain in a second, BDS is taking off in profound ways. And the reason, therefore, and Sylvie's right about this, is why there is an attempt to try and snuff it out here before there's any attempt to try and put it into practice, whether it's the Greens or anyone else. And I think Sylvie is right. There's undoubtedly there was an attempt to try and intimidate anyone else to consider talking about this issue, which I think failed and will continue to fail. But this is a sign of weakness, not of strength. And I think people have misunderstood this idea of an overwhelming campaign by the Labor Party, Liberal Party, Murdoch Press, a lot of other people, against the Greens, particularly about this issue. I mean, just one quick example before I give you some overseas examples about how I think this issue is so vital. Antony Albanese, the federal member for Greenlaw here in Sydney, was regularly writing in the Australian, interviewed and writing his own pieces about this question. The thing that was often ignored when he was talking was the minor detail of the fact that his wife, Carmel Tabbert, was running against Fiona Byrne. Now, you might say it's self-evident that everybody knows that, but the fact is, the average reader wouldn't know that. The fact that the Murdoch press wouldn't have said to him, or haven't insisted, it sort of says, whose wife is Carmel Tabbert. That shows the level of thuggery that we're dealing with here. And very few people, unfortunately, in the mainstream media, challenge the Murdoch press to that. Let me give you a few examples of why BDS is mattering, and more importantly, why it's taking off. And the first quote I want to read you is from none other than Ehud Barak himself, who's the Defence Minister of Israel, former Prime Minister, who gave an interview to Haaretz, the Israeli paper, this week. It's only been published in Hebrew, but it's been translated a few days ago. And this quote, I think, is incredibly important because it shows at the highest levels, you can't get much higher, a few people higher, than the Defence Minister of Israel. BDS is mattering and it hurts because of occupation. It's exactly why it's taking off. Let me read you this. It's a couple of paragraphs. Ehud Barak believes that a UN declaration of Palestinian statehood without a prior Israeli political initiative will paint Israel into a corner previously occupied by South Africa during the apartheid era. His admonition is pungent and scathing, and I quote, "There are elements in the world, quite powerful, in various countries, including friendly ones, in trade unions, among academics, consumers, green political parties, i.e. this room. And this impetus has culminated in a broad movement called BDS, Boycott, Divestment Sanctions, which is what was done with South Africa. This will not happen overnight. The day after September, people will say, so now October has come, the sky hasn't fallen, nothing has happened. This is not true." And then he goes on, last paragraph. "It will start coming at us like a glacier from all corners. There are people in the European Council that deal with export and import, and they are capable, without any government decision, of inflicting significant damage on the Israeli economy. We will see this taking place in academia. We will see this taking place in dock worker unions, consumer groups, and this will seep into governments. This is unwise. To me, this uncontrollable process looks more dangerous than what the Israeli public perceives at the moment. We've been ruling over another nation for 43 years. This is unprecedented. Perhaps China can allow itself to control some small nations in various corners of its empire, and perhaps Russia can. We cannot. There is no chance that the world will accept this. The far right," he means in Israel, "is exposing Israel to dangerous and unwarranted isolation." End quote. The comment's almost comical, on the one hand, because the sad truth is that to tell the idea that it's only the Israeli right which supports the settlements fundamentally goes against history. In the 1990s, during the Oslo process, most of which was run by the Labor Party, the so-called left of the political spectrum, settlements doubled in size. During the peace process, so-called peace process. A few other examples from overseas before I talk about Australia. This was announced in the Financial Times 2 days ago, and I quote, Deutsche Bahn, the German railway operator, has pulled out of an Israeli project that cuts through the occupied Palestinian West Bank after pressure from activists and Berlin. The move marks a victory for pro-Palestinian groups and their so-called Boycott, Divestment Sanctions campaign, which tries to use economic pressure on Israel to help the Palestinian cause. Campaigners were angered by the activities of Deutsche Bahn's international consulting arm, which provided advice on the electrification of the new track linking Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. The high-speed line, due to be completed by 2017, has attracted sharp criticism from Palestinian officials because the 6-kilometre stretch cuts right through the West Bank. End quote. Let's move to the US. There was an interesting report published last week by Forward, which is a Jewish publication, Zionist publication in New York, talking about what is happening on campuses across the US. And as many of you who follow this issue will be aware, many campuses, the more liberal ones, the more conservative ones in the last few years, have attempted, not always successfully I might add, to push BDS onto the agenda. A few examples would be universities might have funds with certain weapons companies, and the university student body, often pro-Palestinian activists, are saying to the university, you should divest from those companies because they're doing bad things to the Palestinians in the West Bank, or indeed in Gaza, or indeed in Israel proper. And the Forward did this long investigation about the effect, according to its work, of BDS on US campuses, and this is what it wrote this week. An extensive national survey by the Forward indicates that despite a sharp increase in the past year, significant BDS activity on the North American campuses is limited to a handful of instances since 2005, the year of the official launch of the BDS campaign. The Forward counted 17 instances and 14 campuses over the past 6 years of the Boycott Divestment effort that was significant and well organised enough to draw an active official response from a student government or campus administrative body. In no instance, according to the Forward, has BDS action led to a university in the US or Canada divesting from any company or permanently ceasing the sale of any product. So on the face of it, and the article is framed in such a way that it says BDS has been a complete failure. If you look at it from that angle, essentially it would say nothing has actually happened in a formal sense, so really what's everyone getting excited about? What the article goes on to say, and I won't read you in more detail, is that it spoke to many activists on both sides of this debate, those who are more pro-Israel and those who are more pro-Palestinian. And what it talked about very clearly was the fact that the issue, as I think Sylvia touched on, is it's raising the question. Yes, implementing something in a formal sense is important as well, that goes without saying, but the truth is, in America, this is one example, the overwhelming position in much of the corporate press, the US government, senators, is overwhelmingly pro-Israel. Overwhelmingly pro-Israel. And we see that in Australia as well. Just a few days ago, someone may be aware of a Liberal Senator, Eric Abetz, who put forward something in the Senate which was read out, essentially saying a few things. I haven't got the actual speech in front of me here, or the motion, said a few things. One, that Marrickville and Greens are disgraceful, I'm paraphrasing. B, that Israel is Australia's wonderful good friend and we should embrace it with open arms. And thirdly, that any kind of mainstream acceptable view of this conflict has to be about supporting Israel. Julie Bishop in the House of Reps did a very similar motion, differently worded but similar. What's remarkable about this is two things, and this is the Australian context, is why is it necessary? Again, it comes back to the question of weakness. If BDS and the Greens are so irrelevant, and the issue is so irrelevant, and the arguments are so bad and extreme and Nazi-like, which is what people who oppose BDS say, why is there a need for this kind of constant love and affection? I use the word constant fellation of Israel. There is no other word for it. Rude but appropriate.